Welcome back, viewers. This is Resistance Radio Music Video Series. As always, I'm your host, Brother Theron. This is the day that the Lord hath made. I shall rejoice and be glad in it. I want to thank everyone that's coming back to tune in once again. The first thing I want to do is suggest that those of you that are listening and watching, go get yourself some paper and a pencil or pen and take notes. After this video, I invite you to give comments or ask questions or contact me through email. Today's title is Various Topics: What Got Me Into Trouble Right Away. Various topics: What got me into trouble right away. The main reason I'm doing this video is this is mainly for the young men, you young men out here that are not married yet or not in relationships yet and you're just getting your life started. And this also goes out to the women out here that are mothers and you're raising sons with or without the father. This is no offense intended to any of you. This is just simply the truth. I'm just going to tell my story and what got me into trouble right away, and later on in the video I'll explain how I got out of trouble. The first thing we're going to do is talk about my experiences. Excuse me. I'm going to give you my experiences because my experiences are true. I'm just going to tell you all like it is. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to give you all of my personal business. There's some things I'm going to disclose to you all, and there's some things I'm not going to disclose to you all. But the main goal is that you all get a deep understanding of what got me into trouble, why I got in trouble for a long period of time, and what steps I took to get myself out of trouble. Hopefully it'll be beneficial to you young men. Hopefully it'll be beneficial to you women out here that are raising sons. I'm going to start off by describing the women in my family first. The women that I was raised around. As I've told you in previous videos, my parents were married. I didn't grow up in a single parent household. I grew up in a household with both my father and my mother. They were married. They worked together to raise myself and my two siblings. The good thing is that on both my mom and my dad's side of the families, there were much older people, largely older women. I mean, there were some older men also, but mainly older women that were either great-grandmothers or great-aunts or cousins of great-grandmothers and great-aunts. Older women that came from a long time ago that grew up during a different time period than the one I was growing up in. These older women were a lot different than the young women that you see in this generation today. These older women wore dresses. Some of them had their heads wrapped. I remember one of my great aunts had her head wrapped every time I saw her. These were women that had had some hard lives and hard experiences in their life, and it got to a point where they had to get on their knees and really pray and really seek the Lord, whom I call Yahweh, whom y'all often call God. They had to get on their knees and seek and pray, who I call Yahweh Shai, whom y'all call Jesus Christ. They had a very deep spiritual connection with God, and they had a big, deep connection with the Holy Spirit, and they had a deeper understanding of things than the typical women. They had also had some experiences that were a lot harder than typical women. Because of this, I was exposed to a different level of teaching, a different level of understanding, and a different level of training. These women would have been my mother and my father's grandmothers and great aunts, and like I said, cousins and aunts that were much older than I was. So my first impression of these women were that they were godly women. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that they did godly things throughout their whole life, but what I was presented with and what I saw and experienced was older, godly women. And in the few men that were in my life that were older, like, for example, I knew both of my grandfathers. They were older, hardworking, wise, experienced men. So, like I said, basically I was raised around older people, old-fashioned people, people that had traditional ideas, people that seemed to be closer to God, or at least have a closer understanding of what was in His Word. This was just the experience that I had growing up from when I was a child. So, okay, like I said, I was raised by both of my parents. I'm not going to put all of their business out there, but again, my mother was an individual, my father was an individual. Even though they were married and loved each other and loved their children and loved the Lord, they were different people. Since I was a young observant a young observant child, I got to experience and observe both of my parents. I would watch how my father would do things. I would watch how my mother would do things. My mother was a bit more strict. My father was a little bit more lenient. My mother was probably strict because she was like most mothers, naturally concerned about her children's welfare and safety and health and well-being. My mother was a nurse, so health and security and well-being was a big deal. So because of that, she was more strict on me and my siblings than my father was. But all that being said, they were both good parents. They both did their best to raise us in a solid, at the time, Christian home. If you go back and watch some of my other videos, the Awakening series, I explain in detail what it was like growing up as a Christian, growing up around Christians, growing up going to Christian churches consistently. I'm not saying it was all bad, but it wasn't all good either. Things just happen to children. Again, I'm not going to tell you all everything, but I was exposed to some things that were beyond my understanding and gave me the wrong perception about things. There was a time as a child where I was watching R-rated movies. I'm not saying that that was something that my parents did intentionally to cause problems or to cause me to think a certain way or cause me to believe a certain way. I think my parents believed that the R-rated films would not have as much of an effect and influence on me as they did. I'm pretty sure I was probably 7, maybe 8 years old the first time I saw an R-rated movie. And it did affect me because what happens with movies and television, this is something you parents need to know and understand. What happens with movies and television, your child is watching it and your child is being exposed to images that they either don't understand or do understand from a certain point of view but don't have a complete understanding. There was also X-rated materials in the neighborhood. I'm not going to say who exposed me to them. I'm not going to say how that happened. I'm not going to say why that happened. I'm just saying it happened. There were things that I wasn't supposed to be seeing, that I wasn't supposed to be hearing, and that I wasn't supposed to be experiencing, but it still happened. And keep in mind, at this point, I'm in elementary school. So all this is having an effect and an influence on me. And unfortunately, parents, listen. As a child, children aren't going to always come and tell their parents everything that happened, whether it be good or bad. And if you have an intelligent, thoughtful, considerate child, your child is sitting there trying to sift through their mind and decide what they're going to tell their parents and what they're not going to tell their parents. So again, I'm not going to put all my business out there. I'm not going to blame any one person, but I'm just going to say there were things that I was exposed to and around that was just inappropriate and not fit for a child that was my age at the time. I'm explaining this because this is going to tie into why I got into trouble later on. So I talked about the R-rated films and the X-rated material. Things like sitcoms. You're a child and you're watching a sitcom and they're telling a joke or they're trying to make light of something that's serious, or they're trying to tackle a serious topic and squeeze it into a 20-something minute show because you have advertisements. Your 30-minute sitcom is actually only about 20-something minutes because you have the commercials in between. But even in those 20-something minutes, they're trying to tackle tough issues, things that are more adult than what children need to be watching, things that may be inappropriate for children to be watching, but it's being broadcast during a time where children are watching TV. Then there was the Christian programs. Now, I'm not going to go too deep in that because I've talked about that in previous videos. I've talked about in those videos various topics about me, various topics more about me. I've talked about that in the videos, The Awakenings, Part 1, 2, and 3. So I'm not going to go into it too deep, but when the whole evangelical Christian movement started to get real popular and real big in the early 80s, this was something else I was exposed to. And keep in mind, my parents were putting me in church 2 times a week, sometimes 3 times a week. So there was that, there was a Christian programming, but there was also the sitcoms, there were the movies, some of which were frightening and violent, some of which were funny comedies, light comedies, but had inappropriate adult humor in it. So I'm being exposed to all this, and again, I'm not tooting my horn, but I will say I was a very intelligent child. Since I was a very intelligent and considerate and compassionate child, I would connect with the characters or whoever was on the screen. I'm finding myself drawn into whatever's happening to them or not happening for them. In a sense, I was becoming empathetic of the characters, and this goes for all types of films. Whether I was watching science fiction film, whether I was watching a fantasy film, whether I was watching an adult comedy, whether I was watching a horror movie, whether I was watching a sad drama with some type of dramatic scene in it that should affect you. So I'm being exposed to all of this, and then on top of that, the Christian programming. And what's happening is the Christian programming is presented in such a way that it's attractive even to children. They make it seem as though the Christian life and becoming a Christian and being a Christian is just something everybody should do. So as a child, when you have a Christian father and a Christian mother take you to Christian churches and they're watching Christian programming and listening to Christian listening to Christian music, it's going to affect how you think and how you perceive yourself and how you perceive the world around you. So it caused me to create misconceptions. I had misconceptions about a number of things, and I didn't feel comfortable talking to my parents about it. I had misconceptions about marriage. I had misconceptions about women. I had misconceptions about sexuality. I had misconceptions about violence. I had misconceptions about my Creator. I had misconceptions about my Savior. I can say for a fact those 6 things that I just counted off were things I had misconceptions about. Well, when we start going into the 80s, I've told you before, that's my favorite decade. It still is. I love the 80s. Loved it. Had a good time. When the 80s started, I was 8 years old, and when the 80s ended, I was 18, about to turn 19. Best time of my life. But I'm getting older now, and since I'm getting older now, I've already gone through puberty, and I'm starting to become attracted to women. Keep in mind, I'm attracted to women, but I'm having the wrong idea about marriage, sexuality, women, violence, religion, etc., etc. So what happened was I turned into this nice guy. Now let me say this, Brother Theron is a nice guy. If I meet you on the street, I'm going to treat you like you're a decent person. I'm going to treat you with respect. I'm going to treat you with a certain level of compassion, with a certain level of love, unless you give me a reason to not treat you that way. Well, here's the problem. This is a very true statement. Nice guys finish last. No one told me this. I had a lot of men in my family. My dad had 4 brothers. My mother had 3 brothers. And I had my grandfather, and I had a brother myself, and I had cousins that were brothers that were both older than me and younger than me. I had all kinds of men in my life, but none of these men sat down and really explained to me the problem with being a nice guy. My parents were okay with me being a nice guy. My dad spoke highly of me being a nice guy. My mother spoke highly of me being a nice guy. The problem is the world doesn't treat you highly for being a nice guy. So I had to find this out the hard way. When I got into high school, I had a few friends. Most of my friends that were true friends were younger than I was. Most of the older students that were in my class are older. I'm not going to say they were mean to me. They weren't mean or disrespectful. They just kind of treated me with indifference. It was just kind of like, okay, there's Theron or whatever. People didn't sit and talk to me about the deeper things in life. People just didn't care. This is the late 80s. So the late 80s, you had the guys that were trying to be the ballers. You had the guys that were trying to be the players. You had the guys that were trying to be the R&B singers. You had the guys that were trying to be the rap artists. You had the guys who were trying to be the drug dealers. You had the guys trying to be the thugs. You had the guys trying to be the gang members. And then you had the nice guys. I just fell into that nice guy category. That would get me into trouble later on. The best examples of men I had when this is going into the late 80s, early 90s, the best examples of men, I have to say my grandfather, my father's father, was the most upstanding man I knew, period. Now, that's not taking anything away from my father. My father was a great dad. I love my dad. I miss my dad. I think about my dad, but he's gone. The most upstanding, respectable man in my life was my grandfather. Next to that was my father. Next to that would be my brother-in-law, because my sister started dating my brother-in-law late 80s, going into the early 90s. And my brother-in-law was and still is an upstanding man. And then my brother, because my brother is almost 3 years older than I was, so he lived a life that was different from mine. We're more different than we are in common. So, but when we grew up, we were sharing a room. So I had a certain level of respect for my brother, because keep in mind, my parents believed in the line of authority. The creator, the savior, the father, the mother, the older siblings, the younger siblings. Since I was the younger sibling, I kind of had to look up and respect my sister and my older brother. So I had a lot of respect for my grandfather. I had a lot of respect for my father. I had a lot of respect for my uncles, because my uncles were unique from my parents. My mother's brothers were different than my mother was. My father's brothers and sister were different than how my father was. I was blessed and fortunate enough to be around them a lot and learn a lot of things, but I didn't learn what I really needed to learn to stay out of trouble. I'm going to explain that here shortly. So what happened was I misunderstood myself. I realized that the other younger men were in trouble as well for some of the same reasons. What I mean by that is I had younger friends. Like when I was in 11th grade, a lot of my friends were like in 8th or 9th grade. That's just who I hung out with. The guys who were my age and older were more interested in hanging out with my brother, and the guys that were younger than me were more interested in hanging out with me. That's just kind of how things worked out. I could see very clearly that my younger friends, the younger men younger than me, were getting in trouble themselves. Some of them were getting in more trouble than I was. I was trying to be a big brother to them, but they were getting in more trouble than I was. But sooner or later, I would get into trouble myself. We're getting there. So I'm going to list some of the false beliefs and false doctrines that I fell for. This could easily be going into the video about false beliefs destroy us. But these are the false beliefs that I had personally that got me into trouble. Number one, being a good person makes whoever you're with a good person. I actually believe that if I was a good person, the people around me would be good people. False belief. Number two, you can do things the way other guys do and get the same results. I found out real quick that's not true. I would look at how guys would pick up girls and get dates and get women in their life, and they just had their way of doing it. And when I tried to do it, it just didn't work. It didn't fit. It wasn't who I was. So I had to be myself, which was important because, you know, at that age, you know, you're finishing high school, you're starting to date, etc., 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 etc. You're supposed to be yourself. But what I found out was if you think you can do things the way other guys do and get the same results, you're dead wrong. And that was another false belief. So that was two false beliefs. Being a good person makes whoever you're with a good person, and you can do things the way other guys can do and get the same results. The other false belief, number three, that I had was getting married solves more problems than it creates. Not true. I tell you all, as I've told you before, I've been married a total of 5 times. Because when you lay down with a woman, you agree that you're going to have sex, you live together, the Lord sees you as married, whether you see yourself as married or not. So the first time I got married was actually in 1990. Keep in mind, I'm 18 turning 19. That's the first time I got married. The first time I got married on paper was in 1997, several years later. So in the context, I'm talking about when I say getting married solves more problems than it creates, I'm gonna put that in the context of my first paper marriage, because that was the belief that I had going into my first paper marriage, which was 1997. So I was talking about 1997. Keep in mind, at this point, I'm 25, about to turn 26. I'm now married with 2 children of my own and a stepson. I have 3 children at this point. I'm still having this mentality from the 70s and 80s. Getting married solves more problems than it creates. That got me into trouble, because really I had no business marrying that woman. Here's why. Understand, I've been reading my Bible since 1979. So this is at least 17 years later, at least. I had the law, which the law tells you how you should marry and not get married. But then when you live in America and you're under America's jurisdiction, America's court system, and Americans' laws, you have the wrong idea about marriage. So I thought that getting married would solve more problems than it creates. But I had no business marrying that woman because she already had a son. Since she already had a son, that means she's already had sex. Since she already had sex, she was actually somebody else's wife. So technically, according to the scriptures, I've shared these scriptures in the marriage series before. According to the scriptures, she was married to someone else. When a man lays down with a woman that's married to someone else, that's called adultery. Adultery is when a man lays down with a married woman. If a woman has a child, whether you see it or not, listen, women, whether you believe it or not, if you have a child with a man, that is your husband. If you go and start to date another man, that man's not your husband. Now, American laws and American paper can say you can get married, but technically it's adultery. So especially for people of my complexion, us brown people, we're breaking the law left and right. If you go to the 10 Commandments, which I do believe in, you go to the law, and you live here in America, most Americans have broken all 10 of those laws. The 10 Commandments, there's 10. In Exodus 20, there's 10 Commandments. Most of us break all 10 of them, including thou shalt not commit adultery. Keep in mind, I don't understand this. So that got me into trouble also, because technically when I married my first wife on paper, at that point I became an adulterer. She became an adulteress. We're already in trouble. Okay, and then the fourth thing, false beliefs, doctrines that got me into trouble, that the law and the commandments were done away with or nailed to the cross and no longer in effect. Almost every Christian church at that time taught that false doctrine. Like I said, at that time. Keep in mind, we're talking about the 90s. The laws were not done away with. That's a whole subject for a whole other video. I'm not going to even go into that. But basically, that's like saying that your parents set out rules for you as a child, and then when you become a high school student, you're older and you're more mature, you can make your decisions, but all of a sudden the parents' rules have no effect. That's how ridiculous that sounds. If you have parents that live in the house with you and they're paying the bills and they're buying the food and they're paying for the gas and they're providing transportation and they're providing support, they're in charge, which means when your father and mother make a rule, that's the rule, period. It's not done away with. It's not nailed to the cross. It's not no longer in effect just because you're older and more mature and you go through a personal experience. I'm going to tell you, Christian religious folks, when you call yourself getting saved, you establish a relationship with the Savior, whom y'all call Jesus. That doesn't mean that you can just stop doing the laws, statutes, and commandments. You're supposed to do them to the best of your ability. I'm not going to go too deep into that, so we're going to go over the 4 false doctrines that I believe. Being a good person makes everyone you're with a good person. False. You can do things the way other guys do and get the same results. False. Getting married solves more problems than it creates. False. The law, statutes, commandments were done away with, nailed to the cross, no longer in effect. False. So what actually happened that got you into trouble, Brother Theron? Well, it's simple. The biggest thing that got me into trouble is I got involved with a woman that was too young for me, and we were both too inexperienced to handle a mature sexual relationship. At the time, I was 18. At the time, she was 16. Neither one of us were mature enough or experienced enough or intelligent enough to properly, notice I said properly, handle an adult relationship. That's what got me into trouble. What I should have done was follow the law, statutes, and commandments, which means the law, statute, and commandments says before I even took her on a date, I was supposed to go to her father and get his permission to court her. Notice I said court her, not date her. I had the opportunity to do that. I just chose not to. Since I chose not to, she made a choice also to get involved with me instead of getting her father's blessings to get involved with me. And that's what got me into trouble. Now, I'm not saying my children are trouble. I love my children dearly. I love all of my sons. And I'm thankful to the Lord my sons are here. And if they're listening, I'm thankful to the Lord for all three of my sons. But I got into trouble at a very young age, and I became a father at a very young age. When my first son was born, I was 19, she was 17. She was still in high school. I was in college. We were both too young. That's what got me into trouble. I'm not going to put all her business out there, but I'm going to say she got into trouble, which caused me to get into more trouble. Domino effect. That's what happens. You have this young couple that are too young to even be getting involved with each other, first of all. The man's making decisions that are going one way, the woman's making decisions that's going another way. That's going to be trouble, because husband and wife are supposed to be in agreement. If we were husband and wife according to the scriptures and had done it biblically, we would be going in the same direction. Which means if I wanted to move my family to Tennessee as a righteous woman, she would be moving with our family to Tennessee. So that's what got me into trouble, was getting involved with a woman that was too young for me, first of all, and then also getting involved with a woman when I was really too young to be having that type of relationship in the first place. So that's what got me into trouble, and that trouble lasted decades with an S, not years, decades. So we're talking about I had to deal with troubles from the first two marriages in the 90s. I had to deal with trouble from the first two marriages in the 2000s. I had to deal with troubles from the first and second marriage in the 2010s. Now, I'm not going to tell my whole story because it would take up too much of this video, but I will say I had the wrong idea about marriage, the wrong idea about sex, the wrong idea about women, and to an extent, a wrong idea about myself, and I had the wrong idea about Christianity. So I ended up having multiple marriages. I've told y'all this in previous videos. I've been married a total of 5 times, 3 times on paper. Those marriages do not work because they were adulterous marriages. I'm not trying to talk bad about any woman in my life, but if you lay down with a man and have his child, that is your husband. If you go and lay down with another man, you're committing adultery. Adulterers get punished. This is why it didn't work. Because, again, ladies, you need to understand something. When you lay down with that man, he's unprotected, you're unprotected, y'all form a soul tie. See my hands? Now, when y'all break up, here's what happens. Y'all go your separate ways, but that man is taking part of you with him, and you're taking part of that man with you. Do y'all remember that song back in the 80s? Every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. That's how the lyrics go. I used to listen to that song and laugh about it, almost like, what is this guy talking about? When you actually form a soul tie with a woman, you understand this. When you and that woman part ways, she's going to always remember you, unless she has complete amnesia. When you and that woman part ways, you're going to always remember her, unless you have complete amnesia. And if y'all have a child together, y'all are certainly going to remember each other. Every time you look at that child, you're going to see some of that other parent in that child. Every time that other parent looks at that child, they're going to see some of you in that child. This is just the way it works, folks. This is nature. Let's say y'all don't believe in God at all. This is just how it works. So I'm forming all these soul ties with all these women. That's getting me into trouble. See, the only biblical, righteous way to form soul ties with several men is if you're going to practice what I call biblical polygyny. If you're going to practice biblical polygyny according to the laws, statutes, and commandments that are set out in the Torah, Genesis through Deuteronomy, if you're going to practice it that way, that's the only righteous way to form multiple soul ties. Because what you're doing, if you're going to take more than one wife, according to the Bible, guys, listen, guys, you got to provide her clothes, you have to provide her shelter, you have to provide her food, you have to provide her transportation. And whatever children comes out of those marriages with an S, you're supposed to provide for all those children. So let's say your first wife has 3 girls and your second wife has a girl and a boy. You have 5 children. and 2 wives. You take care of wife 1 and those children, you take care of wife 2 and those children. Any other way it's done is unrighteous. Polygamy, where people just love different people, that's unrighteous. Because again, I don't want to preach, but marriage is more about submitting to God and serving to God than it is about love. But see, in America, you're taught from a Greco-Roman point of view. Y'all believe it's all about love, and that when you stop loving each other, you should stop being married. That's like saying when you stop loving your children, you should stop being a parent. Y'all have to understand, marriage is the highest form of government. This got me into trouble because this is not what churches teach. This is not exactly what my parents would teach. No offense to my parents, but there's just a lot of things they just didn't cover. There's a lot of things dad and mom just didn't have time to cover. My dad had to work, my mom had to work. My dad had to be a father, my mom had to be a mother. Some things just got missed. So I'm doing these videos, folks, to teach those of y'all that are going through experiences similar to mine. Maybe your parents didn't teach you what I teach you in these videos. Maybe your parents did teach you what I teach in these videos. But for those that didn't get taught what I'm teaching in these videos, that's why these videos exist. I've been doing these videos for almost 3 years. Go back and watch the first one, Apology and Forgiveness, 3 years ago, and work your way up and work your way forward. I advise any young man, any young woman, any old man, any old woman to watch my videos. Not because it's about me, it's about the message. So to sum it up, what got me into trouble again was mainly the false doctrines, but some of the things that I was exposed to as a child unknowingly and unwillingly affected my judgment, affected my ability to make decisions, and how I went about making those decisions. So Brother Theron, how did you clean all this up? Well, the main thing was hard work. This whole time while I'm going through all those multiple marriages and multiple divorces and children and stepchildren and being separated, blah, 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 I was working. When I would work, I would come home with my paycheck. What we would usually do is put the money together and pay the bills. So I had to work my way out of it. I had to be very patient. P-A-T-I-E-N-T. Anybody that wants to work through the worst parts of your life and to get yourself out of trouble, you must be patient. Keep in mind, God, whether you believe in him or not, Yahweh, is in control of everything. Everything that happens to you is to bring a result. Everything that happens to you is to teach you a lesson. Everything that happens to you is to give you experience when you become an older, wiser person. So I got out of trouble by working hard, first of all. I got out of trouble by taking care of my responsibilities. I raised 2 sons largely without their mother. I say largely because there were times she was in their life, there was times she was out of their life. When she was out of their life, I had to work harder and do double duty as father and mother. When she was in their life, I had to be strategic and careful about the amount of time they spent around their mother. And again, I'm not going to say anything bad about her. I'm just going to say that's just how it worked out. She was just not there sometime. So when she was not there, I had to work harder to raise them. Then with my 3rd child, it was a different situation. We were married for a total of 8 years. We divorced. She took him, and as a result, now I'm working hard to support him from a distance, because that's what happens, ladies. Ladies, listen, single mothers, listen. When you take your child away from the father, you make your life harder, and you make the child's life harder, and you make the father's life harder, because the father has to work even harder to take care of a child that he can't see, he can't spend time with. Single mothers, I want you to sit down and imagine for a minute your child that you love so much, and the police coming in, taking your child from you forcefully, taking them into what they call, guardianship, where the state is basically being the parent, and telling you when you can see your child, when you can't see your child, how much money you have to pay to see your child, how much money you can spend on yourself. Imagine that for a minute, ladies. Some of you ladies out here have been through this. I know 2 ladies right now that are either in my family or near my family that had a child or 2 taken from them. It's a horror story. It's terrible, but it does happen. Ladies, you don't want the court involved in your business. You don't want the court involved in your relationships. Let me ask you guys something, men and women. Was the court and the judge in the room when y'all were making love? Was there a guardian ad litem there in the room with you? Was there a judge in the room with you? When you were conceiving your children, was there an attorney in the room with you? Were there any police officers in the room with you? Unless you're into some really freaky shit, that didn't happen. So why, when you divorce, now all of a sudden there is a guardian ad litem in your business. There is police officers in your business. There is an attorney in your business. There is a judge in your business. There is agencies in your business. Where were these agencies when you are laying down making love? Let's just tell the truth, ladies. You were enjoying it to an extent. You were calling out his name. He was calling out your name. Where was the court? Where were the police officers? Where was your parents? Where were his parents? If they weren't involved in the conception of your child, they don't need to be involved in the raising of your children unless they're going to do it for good. Now, all those things I named off, agency, guardian ad litem, attorneys, judges, police officers, if they're going to come into your life and enrich your child's life and improve your child's life and improve your marriage, improve your relationship, that's when they need to be involved. It really doesn't matter whether I pay child support or not, or if I see my child or not. What matters is, am I being a good father? If the answer is yes, then the mother, whoever she is, needs to do the best job she can to allow me to continue to be a good father. And the same way works around if it's a situation where the father is a child. You men out here that have your children, think about something. Think, men that have your children. Are you really doing everything in your power to make your child have the best upbringing with their mother? Yes or no? I don't want to hear a story. I don't want to hear, well, this, and that. I don't want to hear about circumstances. Men, are you doing everything in your power to make your child's upbringing the best it can be with their mother? Yes or no? If the answer is no, you're wrong. If the answer is yes, you're good. So getting back to what I was saying, how I got out of trouble. I had to work hard. I had to be patient. I had to pray. I had to walk with the Most High Yahweh. I had to have faith. I had to have discipline. I had to have self-control. I had to learn to control my mouth. I had to learn to control my temper. I had to learn to control my actions. So a lot of it was will, but a lot of it was the Most High also. Since I do believe in God, I believe in him by his name Yahweh, because I do believe in his son, the Messiah, whom I call Yahweh Shai, that's where my faith is. So since that's where my faith is, whatever happens, I'm going to walk with them, and that will help me get out of trouble. So I got out of trouble with discipline, self-control, patience, hard work, masculinity, self-reflection. There were other things. When I write my songs, that helps me calm down, get my temper down. So I would advise you men, when you're getting upset, when you're getting angry, when you're getting emotional, when that energy starts to build up in you, direct that energy somewhere. Get some weights or work out or whatever you might have to do. Hold on. As I was saying, when you get that energy built up, direct that energy somewhere. Get some weights, go walking, take up a trade or a hobby, do the things that you enjoy doing, do the things that bring you happiness, do the things that allow you to take that negative energy and direct it somewhere. If you have to pray and fast and worship, then pray and fast and worship. So I would tell any men, young men especially, when you're in this situation and you get into this trouble that I'm talking about, there is a way out of trouble, but it's going to require patience, discipline, self-control, anger management, etc., faith, temperance, etc. To sum it up, I did get out of trouble, and I would say I'm at a point in my life where even though things do happen to me, I'm better equipped to get myself out of trouble and stay out of trouble because of the self-control. So we talked about what got me into trouble right away, and we've talked about what got me out of trouble. I hope that you all will take my advice and my direction and my experiences and apply them to your life some kind of way. I pray that y'all get the understanding, that y'all get the patience, that y'all get the discipline, and maybe you can get yourselves out of trouble as well. As always, I'm open to comments. I'm open for you to contact me directly. As always, I'll leave my contact information at the end of this video if you're interested in contacting me directly to talk about anything that we've talked about in my previous videos. If you like this video, please like, please comment, please subscribe to my channel. The subscriptions are going up. Please contact me through email. I'm willing to talk to you through email. Please share this video with others. I hope each and every one of you are blessed and that the Lord will direct your steps. With that, I'll say shalom. Resistance Radio Music.